Right, now let's dive into our content for the week. So, the content that I'm sharing with you this week comes out of a grant through the U.S. Department of Education, and the project was called the Solution Projects, and it came out of the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. And one of the really cool things about this project is when they finished the project, they took all the information I'm going to share with you, plus more, and they put it into like a teacher's manual or a teacher's guide, and they are giving it away for free. So, under resources this week is the Solutions Guide Teacher's Manual or Teacher's Guide, the Solutions Project, excuse me. There is a teacher's manual and it is under resources. And I will tell you that from my point of view, that is a keeper. That is something that I would download and save for later, because remember, once the class is gone, you don't have access. Once you're finished with it, you don't have access to the content unless you reach out to me. So that's something that I would download under resources on Canvas. All right, question number one. Please number all questions from here forward. Question number one. What is schema-based instruction? You may have had that in your math methods course now. If that's the case, write down what you remember in a quick write. And if you have not covered that in your math methods course at this point, what I want you to do is to think about the fact that we are teaching word problems and what might schema-based instruction be. Just give your best guess like we tell our students. So number one, go ahead and stop your video and I'll see you when you come back. All right, so now let's compare what you either remembered or guessed about schema-based instruction with the information I'm going to share with you. So, what is schema-based instruction? Well, really what it is you're taking two types of instructional strategies and you're combining them. You're teaching them together. The first type of instructional strategy that you're going to be teaching is math problem solving. Math problem solving. And then the second strategy, and again, these are going to be combined, is reading comprehension strategies. And if you think about it, that makes sense, right? These are word problems, word problems. And what do you have to do? You have to read the word problem. You have to understand or comprehend the word problem. You have to understand what it is telling you, what information it's sharing with you, and what it's asking you to do. All right. So that makes sense. Again, with word problems, I need to be able to read it and understand what it is telling and asking. That's reading comprehension. And then in order to solve it, I have to use my mathematical problem solving. So that's really what schema-based instruction is. And the goals of schema-based instruction are number one is to improve comprehension, which makes sense because we need to be able to comprehend the word problem in order to solve it. Next, we need to create representations of of the problem. And we know that there can be a variety of types of representations, right? We can have concrete where we're using manipulatives. That's what we're going to be talking about a lot this week is the use of manipulatives. However, you need to know your students to know what type of supports they need, right? It could be representational. We could be using tally marks or we could be using circles. Or if your students are ready for it, again, it all individualized based on your students' needs and abilities, is that representation could be abstract through numbers. But what we're going to be talking about is creating representations using manipulatives, and then you adapt it based on your students' needs and abilities. And then finally, they need to be able to develop an understanding of the problem structure. And so, why do they need to understand the problem structure? And why do you need to understand the problem structure? It's because the problem structure gives you cues to things like what operation you would use. Do I use addition or do I use math? So again, the goals of schema-based instruction are to improve comprehension, create representations of the problem, and then to develop an understanding of the problem structure to support you in solving that problem. And why is this important? Well, it's important because if we look at the majority of errors that students make when solving word problems, those errors are because they don't understand the problem. They don't understand what is being told or what's being asked of them. It's not because of the computational errors. So think about that again. It's not the computational errors that we see most frequently. They are errors related to not understanding the problem. And so what we want to do is we want to use schema-based instructions so that we avoid having students like this little girl who is confused, who doesn't know what to do, who has nothing to guide her, who doesn't understand what's going on. And when we think about those students, then that is a prime time for students to lose motivation, to not be engaged, to have self-doubt. So it can really impact their learning and their view of themselves and their ability to perform and participate in educational activities. So again, this is why we want to use schema-based instruction. So what is schema-based instruction? Well, it is composed of, or it's comprised of two different components. The first component is conceptual knowledge, and the second component is procedural knowledge. So when we're talking about conceptual knowledge, we're really talking about students being able to comprehend the text, what's being told, what's being asked, and then being able to model the problem. That's your representation. And then the second component under procedural knowledge is really looking at how do we find the solution. And again, those are all the goals of schema-based instruction. And the really cool thing about the solutions project is that those researchers came up with some procedural rules that have hand motions with them and graphic organizers that support us and our students in solving word problems. And we're going to go over those in just a little bit. So right now we're just going over a general overview, okay? So what does schema-based instruction look like? Well, first what you're going to do is you're going to give the student a word problem, and either they're going to read the word problem themselves, or you're going to read it out loud, or perhaps if it's on a computer program, there's going to be a digital reading. And what the student is going to do, what we hope, is that first they're going to understand the text and the relationships. So if the student has 4 pair of pants and 5 shirts and they're going on vacation and mom asks how many pieces of clothing do you have, that they're going to understand the relationship there. So first again is understanding the text and relationships. Then the student would create a model. After they create a model, they would select the operation to be used based on a procedural rule, and then they would solve the problem. So again, this is like the process of what schema-based instruction would look like. All right, here's question number 2. So make sure you number it number 2, and then you're going to do this in the document that you're going to submit for participation. So the first question, and you can do these together, they don't have to be answered separately. But first, what is a task analysis, and why would you use a task analysis when teaching word problems? Or what would be the benefit? Again, what is a task analysis, and then why you would use a task analysis, or what the benefit would be. Number 2, go ahead and stop your video and come back when you're done. All right. I would think that at this point in your career that defining what a task analysis would be pretty easy. So really it's just taking a complex task, breaking it into some smaller teachable steps, making sure that those steps are manageable and individualized to the student. And then those steps are going to help students acquire the more complex skill as a whole. And so why would we use a task analysis when we're teaching word problems? Well, word problems are a complex task if you stop and think about it. Think about all the steps that are involved in solving a word problem. And if you look over here to the right, this is the task analysis that you will use when teaching word problems. It's the task analysis that you'll use for all 3 types of word problems. And if we look at this, this has 11 steps. That is complex. So what is the benefit of using a task analysis? Well, one, it helps to guide your instruction, right? It tells you what steps you're going to teach, what order you're going to teach. So you know I'm going to teach this first, I'm going to teach this second. Helps with data collection. Okay, I know I'm going to assess a student and see can they perform steps 1, 2, 3, and 4. But not only that, it supports your student because they can use it for self-monitoring or self-instructing. So when they are actually solving a problem, they can use that task analysis and follow it to help monitor themselves to make sure that they're completing the steps in order and that they're completing all of the steps. And Just as an aside, if you have this task analysis and you are ever in a hurry and you don't have your data sheet with you, I have used this before as a data sheet. It's not the best data sheet, but I have used it before, where I put whether they got the step correct or incorrect and what level of prompting they needed in order to respond correctly. So that's just a little teacher tip there. All right, question number 3. What is a graphic organizer and why might you use a graphic organizer when teaching word problems? Again, question number 3. What is a graphic organizer and why might you use one when teaching word problems? All right, go ahead and stop your video. Come back when you're done. All right, so let's talk about a graphic organizer. Really, all it is it's a visual tool that is going to help students organize their thinking and it is going to facilitate their learning. And when we are talking about word problems specifically, they help students to manage the steps using manipulatives in this case. Now, there are other ways you'll see later on that you can use it, but we would use this initially talking about using it for manipulatives. And so you can see that it would help students organizing their thinking if we were using the word problem that we talked about before. This is only one example of a graphic organizer. That if I were using manipulatives and we talked about me having 4 pair of pants, and then I had 5 shirts, and mom wanted to know how many I have pieces of clothing I have in total, that this graphic organizer would support both my thinking and facilitate my learning. So again, when we're teaching word problems, you're going to be using a task analysis and you will be using a graphic organizer. All right, so there are 3 different types of word problems that we're going to be talking about. I'm going to give you a really general overview of what these are. Do not stress about it. I want you just to listen right now because I am then going to break these down and talk about each one of them individually. But we are going to be talking about this week about 3 different types of word problems that are for addition and subtraction. So that's what we're limited to this week, addition and subtraction. And the different types of word problem are, first, we have what's called a group word problem. And a word problem would be when you have things that are different. Again, when I think about pants, I have 4 pair of pants and I have 5 shirts. Those are different. They are different things. And if I want to know how many pieces of clothing I have altogether, that amount is going to be increasing if I start with 4 pair of pants because I am adding, right? So that's one type of word problem. Another type of word problem is called a change word problem. And these are when things are the same. So imagine that my mom asked how many apples we have, and I said, we have 3 apples in the basket. I don't know about y'all, but I have like a little fruit basket. 3 apples in the basket, and I have 4 apples in the refrigerator. So in that case, the things are the same. What am I talking about? I'm talking about apples. Both apples, apples in the basket and apples in the fridge. So those numbers could either increase in the case that I just showed. Mom wanted to know how many we had total, and there were 2 in the basket and 4 in the fridge. I would add. Now, if I had said that we had 4 apples, but I ate 2 of them, they're still the same thing, but the amount's going to be decreasing because something happened, right? I ate 2 of them, and so we would use subtraction. Again, we'll go into these more deeply in a minute. And then the final type of word problem is called a compare problem. And this is really when you're comparing things to see which has more or how many fewer something has. And there are graphic organizers that you will see in a minute, but there they are listed at the bottom along with the procedural rules. So this again, a great thing to keep, and it is under resources. Before we go into the different types of word problems, though, we want to look at the structure of word problems. What if I'm writing a word problem, what does a word problem consist of? So this is an example of a word problem, and very specifically, this is a group word problem. So when we write word problems, they consist of a minimum of 4 sentences. Let me say that again. They consist of a minimum of 4 sentences. So you're going to need to write word problems as part of your projects, and I'm going to be looking for all 4 types of sentences. So here is an example. I'm going to read the word problem to you, and then we're going to look at the sentences and what they are. Rowan's class is taking a poll on class pets. Rowan has 3 cats. He has 2 dogs. How many pets does Rowan have altogether? Well, if we look at this, there are specific types of sentences that you need to include. The first one is called an anchor sentence, and the anchor sentence gives context for the word problem. It tells us what's happening, where it's happening. So in this case, we know that it's his class and that they're having a poll, and that poll is related to class pets. Because this is a group word problem, we have one small group, and this one is cats. And then we have another small group, which is dogs. Now, again, that is specific to group word problems. The last sentence you have in all word problems, and that is a problem statement. This is the statement that tells a student what they need to do or what you're looking for. And so in this case, what we want to know is to find out how many pets does Rowan have altogether. So that's our problem statement. And I also want you to note that there is a label in this. The label is pets. When we are writing a word problem, we always make sure that we include a label in our problem statement as well as our answer. All right, we're going to stop right there for video number one. How are you doing? You got it? If you're right here, this is where I would think most people are. I'm right here. I need a little bit more information. I'm just kind of getting it, or I am completely lost. If you are completely lost, feel free to write down any questions, but know that in the next video, I'm going more in depth on those three types, and so you might have clarification at that point. All right, everybody, I will see you in the next video.